Hi everyone, so this video will actually explain how you can convert your completed analysis table or your completed STEEL table into a body paragraph for your speech. Alright, so first of all, what I would recommend is that you have this handout, the completed analysis table on Felix Janetsky. I gave you this handout in class, so I'd really recommend that you do have this in front of you so you can make reference to the different sections while I am actually talking about this body paragraph. I will scroll up and down, but it's probably best if you have the handout in front of you too. Okay, let's get started. So first of all, you can see here in the table that I have a topic sentence written. It's clearly worded. It sums up the key idea that the rest of the paragraph is actually going to talk about. So I have actually transferred this sentence directly to the beginning of my paragraph because I had already put a lot of thought into it and I was happy with the way it was worded and the idea that it was communicating. What I have then done though, as you can see, is I've continued that idea by talking about the fact that the poet Peter Janetsky communicated this idea in the poem Felix Janetsky. So I am actually giving my reader enough information so they can orientate themselves, so they can understand what it is that I'm talking about. They know what key idea I'm talking about, but they also now know which text I'm talking about. So as we discussed in class when we highlighted the different parts of the paragraph in different colors, these first two sentences here are actually acting as a topic sentence together. So you don't have to have two sentences to introduce what the paragraph is about, but you can actually do that if you can't fit it all into one sentence. Okay. What you can also see here highlighted in yellow is that the next part, which introduces the technique of a pun, and it also introduces the example that that pun occurs in. I've just mentioned what part of the poem that example and that technique belongs to, so I'm giving the reader more context and information to help them understand what I'm talking about, because when you are writing an essay or a speech, you need to write with the idea in mind or the assumption that the person reading your speech or reading your essay doesn't actually know about the text that you're mentioning. If you write with this assumption in mind, then you will always make sure that you are providing enough information and context and writing clearly so that the person can actually understand what you're talking about. Okay. So just getting back to this example, I've said in the first lines of the poem, Janetsky uses a pun to play on the phrase keeping up with the Joneses. So there's a saying that if you are keeping up with the Joneses, then you're keeping up with what other people are doing. You're not being left behind. The idea in the poem is that Felix Janetsky was someone who only kept up or kept pace with the Joneses of his mind's own making. So it's basically saying that he was so content and comfortable with who he was that he didn't actually feel the need to live up to anybody else's standard. And that explanation, that he's so content he doesn't feel the need to live up to anyone else's standard, that explanation is actually being reiterated, or it is reiterating, sorry, the idea in the topic sentence that having a strong sense of who you are, knowing who you are and being comfortable with that enables you to feel like you belong, because you don't actually need to feel like you aren't good enough. This idea is continued. I've said that he has such a strong sense of identity, acceptance of himself, that he feels a sense of belonging despite being a migrant in a foreign land. This portrayal of Felix is continued in the final stanza of the poem. So you can see here that I've actually moved on to a completely different part of the poem. And I know that a lot of people were feeling a bit confused about how they could talk about two different pieces of evidence in the one paragraph. This is all you need to do. You just need to make the connections for the reader, just explain your thought process. So all this sentence, all these words are doing here is saying that this idea that we've just talked about, the idea that he was content with who he was, he knew who he was, and therefore always felt a sense of belonging. That idea is continued in the last stanza of the poem. So I have set up here that in the first lines of the poem, this idea is communicated. The same idea or a similar idea is communicated again at the end of the poem. And then I've led into my second piece of evidence, and I've talked about the technique that is used in this example. Now, what you have perhaps also noticed, and I can't remember if we covered this in class, so I'll just repeat it again here. In my quotes from this poem, there are forward slashes in between some of the phrases. Now, that forward slash actually indicates that that was the end of the line of poetry, and this is the start of the new line, and it ends, and there's a new line. So when you're quoting lines from your poems, make sure that you actually use the forward slash to show where the lines ended and began. I've continued analysing this piece of evidence, saying that the image is actually juxtaposed or contrasted against the poet's portrayal of his own unhappiness. So while his father was really happy, and here's another piece of evidence again, he was deeply unhappy. And the connection I've made back to the topic sentence, because each part of your paragraph must link back to this key idea, the connection I've made is basically saying that because Peter Chernetsky never had a strong sense of who he was, he always felt unhappy, and he felt a sense of isolation. He didn't feel that sense of belonging because he actually never felt a strong sense of who he was, which is the opposite to his father. So you can see how all of the different parts of the poem are actually reiterating this key point at the very beginning. And again, the linking sentence, if you actually go back to the table or the paragraph, and if we go back to the table, it's probably a bit clearer. We can see that the topic sentence says, having a strong sense of one's own identity is inextricably connected to feeling a strong sense of belonging. And the idea is repeated in the linking sentence, which just basically says one must feel a sense of comfort with and acceptance of themselves before they can feel like they belong. So it's the same idea, but just worded in different ways. So your linking sentence at the end of your paragraph is actually one of the easiest parts to write. All you need to do is just sum up what that paragraph has actually been about. And if you have written your topic sentence, well, all you need to do is actually reword your linking sentence in a different way so that you are not sounding repetitive, even though you are actually repeating the same idea over and over again. So just remember, this is the key idea. Everything that comes after it must make some connection or repeat the idea that you have stated in your topic sentence, and that is how you should put your body paragraphs together. So I hope that this video has helped. Just remember that even though the table and the paragraph here are not about the concept of cultural identity, you are basically completing your table in the same way. Have your topic sentence, find your examples and your evidence, and remember, I'm only expecting you guys at this point to find 2 quotes for each idea that you have, each body paragraph. Once you've found your quotes, choose which techniques are the strongest, which techniques are actually being used in your evidence to communicate your key idea. Explain how the techniques have been used to communicate the key idea in your topic sentence. Then, lastly, just reword your topic sentence. If you can just follow these steps and just take one step at a time, then I am confident that you will have some beautiful body paragraphs for your speeches.